So flash photography is definitely a mystery or a challenge for a lot of new event photographers. And there's some advice out there recommending people shoot in manual, and some people are recommending people shoot in TTL. I'm going to give you guys a straight, direct answer, and that is that 99% of the time you should be shooting in TTL. I'm going to visually demonstrate this with you. I have a model that's going to be coming in shortly. But first, let me explain why I think you should shoot in TTL, why I think manually shooting has some major shortcomings. So one of the arguments I've seen is that in manual, you have more control. And while technically you have more control, de facto, in reality, you do not have more control over your flash. There's a place for when manually using your flash as a roaming photographer can work, but the caveats are so severe that I don't think it's actually going to be practical. If you plan on directly aiming your flash, or maybe you have any diffusion device, it doesn't really matter, and you plan on photographing people at the same distance every time, at the same aperture, because maybe you're photographing the same sized groups, or you just choose a large enough aperture that will stay consistent and will get a correct depth of field, etc., to get many people, and you're never deviating from that, and your walls are all going to be the same, etc., and they're not adding any extra light in, potentially, that kind of thing, although it wouldn't have a severe impact, then yes, maybe you could shoot manual. But an event is a very live and dynamic thing. Often you're not only seeing dynamic situations in one room, but you're going room to room. It's not just DJ lighting that's changing, it could be the lighting in the room. And like I said, changing your aperture will mean you need to change your flash exposure. With enough experience, you can intuitively make a lot of assessments. This is coming from someone who likes to shoot in manual like 90% of the time when it comes to my camera settings. I found I intuitively start dialing in my exposure as the situation changes, whether that means me walking into a different room or the cloud cover changing, etc. But visually being able to discern what your exposure should be based off the ambient light is going to be very different than knowing intuitively what your flash output would be like. Furthermore, knowing your flash output maybe can work if you're, again, always shooting at a specific distance. At some point, you're going to know what your flash should probably be powered at without having to think about it. So, but what about control? Well, you're in a lot of control. You can change your flash output, but what if you want creative control? And that's where we're going to get into very serious limitation if we're shooting in manual mode. If you're in manual mode and you want to change maybe from using a diffusion device, or you want to throw your flash into the corner of a room, or maybe you want to bounce off a wall that you're next to and get like a giant softbox effect, all of those are going to have drastically different exposures that you will not intuitively understand because there's going to be too many things you would actually have to calculate. You'd have to calculate the distance to the wall. You have to calculate how much light would reflect off the wall. If the wall isn't completely white, it would reflect less light, that kind of thing. And it's all going to be very impractical. I've seen advice given, well, you just look at the shot, and then after that, you dial up or you dial down your exposure. And yeah, technically you can do that. But again, an event is not going to be, you don't really get a second shot. Often a good event photographer is documenting moments, you're looking for pivotal moments, you're looking for high emotional moments, big interactions, that kind of thing. If you're only going to be roaming around and shooting groups of people and you're not looking for interesting candids and moments that might happen at different distances, and you might be using a zoom lens at different focal lengths and all that, it becomes so impractical. So let's get our model in here and we'll see exactly how much we would have to power our settings if we're shooting in manual up and down as we change the direction of our flash, add a diffuser, etc. A little note here, I'm in a relatively confined and consistent space compared to something like a banquet hall. All the walls are going to be of equal distance to me, and they're all going to be the same tone of white. And so we're not going to see a huge variation. However, it should be enough to show that shooting manually will become impractical if I want consistent exposure and not have to worry about it in post. So we're here with Brixton. I've got my ambient light dialed in. My shutter is at 1/60th and my aperture is at 6.3 and my flash power is at 1/64th. Stay there, pal, you're good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with that. We're gonna stay in manual and I'm gonna try different creative looks with my flash and we're gonna see how much my exposure varies. So Brix, look at the camera. So that's with the cap on. Next what we'll do is I'm gonna bounce straight up. Look at the camera. That's straight up. Now I'm gonna go for something like what I would equate to like a giant softbox look. I have a strobe to my wall to my right, and that's gonna bring in a lot of light. Brix, look at the camera. Good boy. Now we're gonna start seeing a greater difference. So stay there, pal. You're almost done. Next, let's just throw my strobe into a corner. Brix, look at the camera. And there we go. So like I said, we're not going to get a massive difference because of the type of walls I have and the relative equal distance they all are to me. But now what we're going to do is we're going to switch modes and we're going to find out how much more consistent, stay there, pal, TTL is going to be. So let's go through that sequence again. I'm going to put the cap on. I'm trying to be quick because Brixton normally works for treats. You see his ears perk up, so he's waiting for one. So we're in TTL, and now I'm going to take a shot. Okay, next, we're going to go with that straight up look, although I would not normally do this, by the way, because it's going to create shadows under the eye. This can work if you have enough distance between you and your subject. Stay there, pal. Look at the camera. Brix, look. Look. Oh, he's getting pretty frustrated. Brixton. Look at the camera. You want a treat? Oh. Here you go. All right, now we're going to go to that wall look. Look. All right. And now we can bounce off a corner. Now what we're going to see, I haven't even looked, but I know they're all going to be relatively the same exposure. We're going to get a different look because the light's coming from different directions, but I didn't have to stop and think about how to change the power. If I'm in manual and now we have much varied conditions, okay, jump down. And we have varied conditions, I'm going to have to think about how to change the power every shot I take. And I don't think that just changing your exposure after you look at the image is viable when we're doing something very dynamic like an event. So there are a few times I do actually shoot in manual, but it's more of a hybrid situation. One example would be if I'm photographing detail shots. I'll often do a detail shot with a more basic lighting setup, off a wall, rear corner, that kind of thing. And then to spice it up, if I have the time, I will do some rim lighting. If you're not familiar with rim lighting, it's a backlight that's going to create a rim of light on your subject matter. So what I will do in that situation is leave my key light in TTL to make sure I just get a proper overall exposure, and then I will have a rim light opposite of it set to a high zoom mode, so it's a tight beam of light, and then that will be my rim light. If you do this in TTL, the camera can have trouble discerning how to properly expose, and I won't get into the details. And I find that just controlling that rim light in manual is a lot simpler, and you'll get better results. So another time I will shoot in manual, and I'm going to first start with this premise. I'm really a firm believer, the longer I've done this, that simpler is often better, and you don't want to get too experimental or too out there with your lighting setups to the point in which you are getting less quality work, meaning maybe you're getting cool shots, but you're getting fewer moments captured, that kind of thing. But one thing I have experimented with, I've done before, is that maybe I have a TTL light, a flash in TTL on my camera, and then maybe I will point a flash on a light stand up into the ceiling to create an ambient consistent light, and then I basically use that as like a fill. And again, this is my key light, which I'm being more creative with directionally and that kind of thing. And then of course there's all the non-event type stuff that you might do. Like for example, if you're doing impromptu portraits using like a studio setup, you're adding modifiers like umbrellas, that kind of thing. Your subject matter will be on a stool the entire time and you don't need to change your exposure, then of course shooting in manual will make more sense. You don't want TTL in a situation that is consistent because then your light potentially could be inconsistent. I'd love to hear your opinion. Do you shoot in TTL? Do you shoot in manual? Are you firm on one or the other? Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments. I always enjoy the engagement. All right, that's it for today. I hope you guys liked the video and the demonstration. This model is not cheap, so make sure you support the channel so I can buy more treats. Thanks again. Appreciate you guys.